So today it's a little UI. Maybe we'll go over some other stuff depending on what you want. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, can you see my screen, Prince? Yeah, here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Okay. So when doing UI in Unity, it's completely different than doing UI in like websites and stuff. You have to do everything in a different way. They recently added a new way to create UI called UI Toolkit, but that's like beginning to become used. It's maybe not used everywhere. And for now, we're gonna learn the other way, the traditional way of creating UI, and it also works in the scene hierarchy here as you're used to. And it's a really easy way to create UI, and it's really intuitive as well. But it's hard to create UI that is responsive and scales well with everything. Um, and layouting is also maybe a little harder here. But if you want to do UI to get started, just right click UI, and then you can see all of the UI elements you can add. Um, and if we add an image, you can see automatically an event system gets created and a canvas gets created.
What type of project is this? Just 3D?
Yeah, just reading.
So you created UI image.
Yeah. So a white square appears, and you can see that when you, if you want to edit your UI, click on the 2D button because this is a 3D scene. When you click the 2D button, it will go to a 2D view, and it will be better to edit UI. UI is like a huge a canvas, you call it, and you can see here that it changes size depending on the game size. So you can see how it changes aspect ratio depending on the game size, the game window, or the scene window. I don't actually know which one, but you can click here, 16:9. Yeah, it is the game window. And then it will state this aspect ratio. So if you think your game will be 16:9, click on the game window, click on 16:9, and then you'll have the same aspect ratio. And then you can have a consistent layout to be working with as a starting point. Just to show you guys what the canvas is, I'll create a small cube in the world and set it to 0, 0. And you can see it's so small and it's here in the corner. So it's a combined 3D and 2D world. So this is the cube, and if I zoom out, you can see these two white lines are the canvas, and I can keep zooming out, and there's the image. So the camera doesn't see the canvas, it's laid on top. And we can see that in the canvas here, it has a render mode screen space overlay. So it's kind of in the same editor, in the same world, but the camera doesn't pick the UI up as part of the world. It's a kind of separate thing on top. You can change how it acts by creating a world space canvas here. Then it's actually in the world, and you can create UI in the world. So if you do kind of games where UI is part of the world and part of the game, you can do that instead. And if you want to do scaling, this is the canvas scaler. Usually it's set to constant pixel size. That means if you do different screen resolutions, it will have the same size, and that's not always what you want. So if I set it to 1080p, you can see that the image has a certain size here. It's a little hard to see because of the background. Yeah, I'll just move it to the bottom, I guess. And if I change it to 4K, you can see it gets even smaller. So it changes, it has a constant size and it doesn't scale with the screen. But when you change the canvas scaler to scale with screen size, it's now set up differently. And there's a couple of settings here, like the reference resolution. What resolution are you working with as a starting point? I always use 1920 by 1080 when I'm making games. So if you set that up, now when you change the resolution from 4K to 10K, the UI will stay consistent, the consistent size. And you have to keep that in mind when you're developing UIs in Unity, that scaling will look a lot different depending on which phone and what screen you're looking at. So the best way is to, here in the game view, select the simulator, and then select a bunch of different phones here from here, and it can simulate how the UI will look. So here you can see that the UI got really small because I'm on this phone that has a different aspect ratio. It's the opposite of 1080 by 1920, it's this way, and phones are that way. So the UI becomes really small because it's set to match the width. But I can set it to match the height instead, and then it has the same size as the 1080p resolution. So if we go back,
Phone, but like in landscape mode.
yeah, we can choose the phone and then we can rotate it. And you can see the size of the UI there. Always when you do UI, always test it on a real device. That's the only way to know if it works. Because here you can say, okay, this is a fine size of UI, but when you actually look at it with the phone, it might be actually way too small. Especially phones, you have to do big UI and you have to really be really conservative about how much UI you have, because on a phone, your fingers are in the way. You don't think about that when you do UI and UX. Your fingers can be in the way you point and stuff that can interrupt what you're looking at. For example, if you're dragging something, a lot of people will make the box underneath your finger, so you can't actually see your cursor when you're dragging. You have to offset it depending on your finger. And if you're left-handed, it will be offset in the wrong way. So there's a lot of things to think about when making UI. We'll not go into all of that. I'll just briefly mention that there's a bunch of things, and it's actually pretty difficult. But yeah, let's do some UI, and it's pretty easy. Just right-click. I usually do it on the canvas because it has to be in a specific canvas to have UI, to be able to render. If I move this image out, it's gone. It will no longer be rendered. It has to be a child of a canvas. And when it is a child of a canvas, it gets a rect transform instead of the traditional transform. And the rect transform is a little different in the way that it has more settings for anchoring and for moving stuff in scaling. So let's say I want this image to be like my profile picture in the bottom left corner. So I can click on this thing and hold Control and Shift down, and then I can click this one. So now it's anchored to the button. And if I hold Control Shift Alt, all the buttons, it will go down there to the button. So now you can see that the image will always stay there, and the position is relative to the corner of the screen. So whatever aspect I have, like, it will always be in the corner now. And then if you want to offset it from the corner, you can change the values here. So we have an image down there in the corner. Right now it's just white. If you have any sprites in your project, you can pick one of those. These are built-in Unity sprites for their own Unity UI. Your image didn't change its position. Okay, so you can try again to click this one. Control Shift Alt.
Control Shift Alt.
All of them. And then click on which one you want. So all of them do a separate thing. I think even Control doesn't do anything. Yeah, I don't think Control does anything. Oh, okay. It says it here. Shift also set pivot, and Alt also sets position. So you don't need Control. So the pivot is on the image. It has a pivot. You can see it here, the small circle, and you can move the pivot around, and you can lock it to a corner. So this is for scaling. So if it scales from that point. So it scales like this instead from the center like this. Like, I don't think you can do that, but like it scales from that corner up when you scale it up. So if I set the width and height, it's like from that corner. So that's what an anchor is. You probably know already. Okay, so yeah, if you Shift is the anchor and Alt is also position. Yeah. And there's also the stretch options here. If you want to do a bar in the button, you can pick this one, for example. That will do a bar in the bottom of the screen. It's a really nice visual. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna create a new UI image, and I'm gonna set to a bar in the button by holding Shift and Control. So now it's in the bottom of the UI like a bar. I'm gonna set the height a little taller. Like 160, that looks fine to me. And I'm
So you created it, you anchored it to the
I used this one,
You have to hold anything.
Alt and Shift both, and then click on it. Yeah, so now you have an image at the bottom of your screen. And I want to change mine to black, and I want to make it less transparent so you can see the game world behind it. When you're doing UI, transparency is also a thing you have to think about when making games. Every time you make a panel, you won't be able to see the game underneath. So a lot of people do transparent or semi-transparent, so you can kind of see the game while you can also see the UI.
You can hold it from the color.
And you can change which way you want to change the colors as well. I think 0 to 1 is the most intuitive, but there's also 0 to 255 and HSV, which we talked about last time. So, yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna do, I want my UI to have a bunch of different icons set out in a row. So now we're gonna learn about something called layouting. When you add a component, there's a menu called layout, and these are all the tools you have to lay out stuff in your UI. I want to do a horizontal layout group because I want my objects to be spaced in a horizontal fashion. So I'll pick that one. And I'll make the image I made before a child of this panel by dragging it down there. I'll rename my parents to a panel and this to like a icon maybe. So now you can see the icon should have moved, and now when I try to move it manually, it won't actually move because its position is controlled by this horizontal layout group. So when I copy the icon more, you can see how it behaves. If I just duplicate it by clicking on the icon and pressing Ctrl D for duplicate, you can see how the icons are duplicated across the bottom of the screen.
You added the layout component to the X,
Yeah, to the parent.
to the panel.
Yeah, the panel is just an image that I renamed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Aspect ratio better or was horizontal layout? Now if I do this. Whoa.
Yeah. So now they're like spaced apart equally, and you can change how it's aligned. So if I pick middle center, they're all in the middle center. They're aligned from the middle. And I can change the spacing between them as well and stuff like that. I want to add some padding. So I'll do 888. So now there's a padding around the image. That's what I want. Bunch of settings here. And there's also these ones, control child size, use child scale, and child force expand. If you play around with them, you can see now it has forced them to expand to the whole, take up as much space as they can. You probably don't want that, to be honest. And now it kind of looks fucked up because the scale has changed. I fucked my project up. So now these are not the right size.
What happened? Sorry, I was in the chatting.
I was just, I played around with these. I've just put a check mark on all of them, and they expanded it all to fill out all of them. But now they look kind of weird, and I don't want that. So the one Kate named was an aspect ratio fitter. And I tried to put this on here to fit the aspect ratio because I want it to be 1 by 1. But it says that the parent has a type of layout group component. A child of a layout group component should not have an aspect ratio fitter component since it should be driven by the layout group. So this is one of the things you'll notice, that once you make UI in Unity, it will give you these kinds of errors, and it's because you're doing something wrong. If you see one of these errors, you're probably doing something wrong. If I try to set that width controls height and set it to 1, the aspect ratio will actually be correct. You can see this 1 to 1 here. Now the width is the same as the height. but it still has this error because we're doing something that we shouldn't be doing. So you have to find a way around that, and you often find that when you're trying to do layouting. So if you want to do layouting, it's always boxes within boxes within boxes, exactly like web UI. Everything is a box, and if you want to position something, add another box, and stuff like that. And these boxes can interfere with each other, and the rules can interfere with each other. I'll remove the aspect ratio because we shouldn't be using that as it says. Now I want to think about like what my UI kind of wanted to look like, what I kind of want to make. I'm gonna be going for a game UI. So there's this website called I think it's called Game UI Database. Great resource for learning and a great resource for inspiration. And this website has all games and they have perfect screenshots of UI and a lot of different games. I'm gonna pick one and I'm gonna try to recreate it, the UI from there. Great way to learn, great way to, yeah, again, get inspiration. Monkey Ball. So you can see here that this game's UI is kind of 3D and these probably move around. It's a little hard to see with the images, but I suspect when you click this, these will like go around and stuff. So this is actually game objects and not UI.
Diegetic UI.
Yeah, so you actually create this in a different way by not using that. You can argue that the window here could have a UI on it, like a world position UI on the 3D object, and then the 3D objects move around. I think this is maybe a little too hard to create, but we can look at like something like this and try to create something like this where the game is has a bunch of different things around it. Yeah, so as I said, you have to analyze it in a way where you think it's boxes within boxes. So what kind of boxes do you see here? What kind of layouts do you see? I'll start with the first one, probably the easiest one, is these ones here. These ones, you can see that they're grouped together in an invisible box with a vertical layout. So it's the same component copied around with the same layout. So I would say there's a box, if I were to draw it. Can I do that? Capture region? Yeah, I can draw on my screen like this. So I would say that there's a box here. Fuck. I swear to God, there's a drawing tool somewhere. Capture. Plus. Okay, never mind. You guys get the idea. I just wanted to draw on this. But there's a box here. And you could say there's a box here. Depending on this thing, it's a little weird. It's also maybe a vertical, two boxes on top of each other. And there's a box around here, which is a horizontal box. Because they're scaled in this direction, they're put in this direction. And we have a separate box for the other things. But also the replay button, you can argue that there's two boxes here, one for the vertical and one for the horizontal. So they could all be in the same box, or they could be in different boxes. There's a lot of different ways to achieve the same result, and that's the hard thing about UI because there's so many tools to create what you want, and you have to just pick a way and just go with it. So let's create. I'm gonna create this UI here as good as I can without the graphics. Yeah, so it's a little hard because now our screen real estate is really getting small. But I'm gonna try to do this. So the panel I got here, I'm gonna remove this and make it a vertical layout group. Right. Now you can see all the children are positioned like that in a vertical fashion. I'm gonna, instead of stretching it at the bottom, I'm gonna pick this one.
do a horizontal layout and then add a vertical?
Yeah.
How did you rotate the camera?
I just scaled it. So I didn't actually rotate it, I just scaled it on the direction. You should normally not rotate UI. If there is an option to rotate it, I think it's the next one to set. There's an option to rotate UI, but you should not do that.
My panel still stays in the same aspect when I try to scale it. I can't change it.
To go down because you have an aspect ratio filter on your which controls the aspect ratio. So you can just remove that component completely. Now you should be able to scale. So
We only need 4 buttons, right?
yeah, we only need 4 buttons, so I'm gonna delete one of them. And the buttons here are, as you can see, they're full. They're like the full width of the invisible box, I would say. So I would say that I want to control child size in the width. So you can see that the width scaled for the buttons to be the same there. Use child scale, force expand. So now they're expanded and they keep the same size. I would disable child force expand height because all the buttons have their own height and it's consistent. If I want to add more buttons, I don't want them to, first of all, spread out, and I don't want them to scale. I want them to have a consistent size in the height, but in the width, I want them to have all the width of the parent box. So like this.
For some reason, they all are, mines are like not centered. I have the child alignment in middle center.
Yeah, that's because I think it's because you try to learn to that. You should force expand. Yeah, you can see it would change and do all of it for and the height you don't. And I would say instead of middle center, you should scale it from the top. Because as you can see in this UI, visually you can add another box, and if the game designer wants to add another box, they should totally be able to do that. So you should think of the UI as a dynamic thing. In the beginning of your game, you might only have one box for the time score, and you would say, okay, that's the only box we have. We don't have any of the other ones. Can my UI accommodate one box? Can it accommodate 4 boxes? Can it accommodate 5, 6, 7, 8? Like you have to think about these things. And the more you accommodate early, the easier it will be later. And it's also kind of a trap because you can accommodate for too much that you won't need later. But your game will change as you make it, so you won't know how many boxes there will be in the beginning when you start the project, unless you thought really hard about everything. So always make it room for to grow. So that's the reason why we're using the vertical layer group to begin with, because we could have positioned these ourselves and said, okay, we only need 3 boxes. But as soon as we add a 4th one, we were like, okay, now we have to move all the boxes again. So this is to create a dynamic UI. Yep. So I feel like my box is a little too big. It goes above the screen, so I'm gonna scale it down a little on the height. I'm gonna make sure it's centered. So the pivot is here, so when I change the screen resolution, it will always be on the right corner, on the right middle. Like that. Yeah. Now we want to make these buttons. Right now they're just weird images. I'm gonna pick all of them and pick a proper image. And I'm gonna pick one called background. So this is the default yeah, it's the same as the UI sprite. It's kind of the default button for Unity. It's the default yeah, UI sprite. I'll pick the one called UI sprite. So now they're kind of, you can see that they have rounded corners, and that they're not a bad resolution even though it's scaled around. And that's because we've used 9 slicing. This sprite is using 9 slicing, and it's used in a sliced image type, which means that you can see that the image is actually a really low resolution, but we're slicing it and moving it around. I can reduce the pixels per unit multiplier to reduce the rounding or increase it. But you can see the resolution gets lower. So usually you don't want to play with this, you want to change your sprite. And we can do that later, but for now we're going to use these ugly white squares. So I'm going to change the width as well to like 512 or something like that, because they should not fill the entire screen. So now we have these, it's still images, but we want to make them buttons. So select all of your icons and make them buttons instead.
Did you change the width?
I changed the parent width up here, so all the children will change with it. So that's the great thing about we're changing the child width. So we can change how wide we want them to be at the same time. So I'm just making it 512. That's a divisible by 8. So I'm just picking that.
Very great parenting advice.
Hmm?
You can choose how wide you want your children to be.
Unity really fucks up your search history. Like how to destroy children and how to remove parents and stuff. You're searching all this all of the time, and it kind of becomes weird at some point. You're definitely on the FBI watch list. How can I remove the siblings? That's that's a valid question in Unity, because that's the way you refer to hierarchy stuff.
Yeah.
So it's actually a valid statement, a question.
Okay, my buttons are not adjusted to the width of the parent. I don't know why.
So you have to have all of these selected.
Yeah, I have them.
Okay. Then it might be. Okay, that's because the scale is 1.5 and they have to be at one scale for all of them. So you can, these are not, so you can pick all of them at the same time. So again, UI, you want to keep, you basically don't want to touch scale or rotation most of the time, because that changes your layout, because scale is applied after layouting. So if I change the scale of the buttons, they will be scaled after the layout has been done. Usually you don't want to play around with that when you're doing animation and stuff. It's really useful actually. Okay, so I've added a button component on all of my images here. When I go into the game now, you can see that they're actually changing color when I press on them. And that's because they have a transition and they have all of these settings here. So they change color when I press on them. That's awesome. So now we have buttons that work and don't do anything. We also want text on our UI. You can see here that there are 2 different texts, a name for the UI and a number. So let's add those. So I'm gonna right click on just the top one for now. We'll see why later. I'll click on the top one and add a UI, a text Mesh Pro. And right now I can't see it because the button is white. I'll make the text black. Now we can see the text. And we need 2 texts. So I'll duplicate that. And now we can see our 2 texts.
How did you make the image to be a button?
I
It's not a button.
just add component button. So an image, like all of these things in this menu are just to help you get started. So when I add a UI button, where is the button? Button here. When I add a button, I'll add it here. So you can see that it's actually just an image with a button component and then a text as a child. So it's exactly the same as we did here, but it's pre-made for you. So you can choose either or. But our button is going to look a little different. It's going to have two texts. And we want to lay out these horizontally.
Are we going to text?
Yeah, to text on the button here, I'm going to rename this to it's actually not a button. Oh, I don't know why I added a button, because you can't actually press on this. It's just UI, so it's actually not a button. I don't know why I added it. Yeah, we can remove it. We don't need it, but if you want to make a button, that's how. These down here look like buttons. These don't. These just look like squares. So we're gonna keep it at that. So score. We're gonna add a horizontal layout group to our image here. So the two texts are aligned. So you can see now that they're like before they were just, you can move them wherever. And we want to align them horizontally. You can see that they're horizontally aligned. So add a horizontal layout group to score UI thing. And then we want to control both the width and the height actually. So you can see now that they're taking half each and they're filling up the thing. Boom, boom. We want to select both texts and then center align them. And you can see that one of the texts are starting from the right and one from the left. So we're gonna pick the right one and then start it from the right. So it's like and I want to change the height of this to be a little smaller, maybe 86, like this. And I want to put some random input text to see how my game looks. The score was this side, I think. Yeah. And this is time score. So now our UI kind of looks like this. It doesn't really look like this because this has a different sprite. But as soon as we change the font and the sprite here, it will look like that. Where did we go? Where did we come from? CodeNitro. There. So if you want to make it exactly look like this, we can take a screenshot and then copy it, or you can make your own graphic that kind of looks like that. We're not going to do that. I think so. And you also realize that this has a different font. I think I'll show you guys how to import a font because that's really important. Also, a thing that's important that me and Kate learned the hard way is that when you do UI, it should have a white color always. So I'm gonna tell you why now. So you realize that this sprite that we added to the icon is white. If you look at it, it's white here and black. That means that we can go into the color and we can actually change the color exactly as we want it to with the same image with this multiplier. And we couldn't do that if the button wasn't white. So you want to keep it as wide as much as possible. So you could go into the menu and actually change this one here around. If you make the wood and this one separate, and you make them grayscale, both of them, you can actually add them into the menu and change the colors in the game, in the Unity editor. So you can animate it and you can do whatever later, and it gives you much more flexibility if you do that. But if you're like, sure, I want this UI because my artist has made this and we don't want to animate it, we don't want to change it, go ahead and pick a color and do all sorts of cool effects in the sprite, and just know that you can't change it in the editor later without it looking weird. I think I might make the graphic just to show you guys once how you import and create a graphics for Unity. I think that's pretty important. When making graphics, there's a bunch of things to think about: the color, the format, and aspect ratio and stuff like that, and slicing. So I'm quickly gonna make an image. I'm gonna post this image on the Discord if you guys want to add it to the game. I'm actually gonna make it right now. So when making games, images for games, you always want a divisible by 8 resolution, always, by standard. So none of this 1920 by 1080. You want it to be, for example, 512 by 512. That's divisible by 8, but it's not the right aspect ratio. So I would say 512 by 128. So if you don't know what numbers are divisible by 8, it's like you quickly learn it as you go, because the numbers are so important for game development, and it's because of how graphic cards works and stuff like that. So always keep it at that resolution.
Graphic that will be scalable.
Yeah, we're gonna make a graphic that's gonna be scalable. So I'm gonna create this here, and I actually want to. This is Affinity Designer. I want to have a transparent background. So now the background should be transparent. I'm gonna make this here, and then I'm gonna send it to you guys so you can use it. You can use whatever program you want to create graphics. You usually export as a PNG to keep transparency and stuff like that. Edit, document setup, transparent background. It's like I can't see the background because it's white for some reason. And I think there should be a setting for that. I just don't know which one.
Phil, you want to change the color of the inside?
I want to change the background so it's like so I can see that it's actually transparent, so I can see the white sprites I'm working with. Because right now I have this thing, and I can't see it because the background is not white. I'll do a workaround for now. I'll make the background black, and then do my image white. So your images always have to be white, and if we're copying this this image here, it has kind of these things here, and it has a lot of lighting effects. I don't think I can add that because I'm not an artist. I don't know how to do that in a timely manner. So I'm just gonna do it like fast and furious. So that kind of looks like that, right? Yeah. So I want to export this. I'll disable the background. So note that it's transparent, but you can't see that because I don't know how to change that.
We can see it.
Oh, you guys can see it. Oh, I can't see it on my screen. It's completely white.
Your screen doesn't like you.
No, that's so weird. It's
Yeah, it is weird.
What did you do to your screen?
I don't know. So I was trying to do that so it's checkerboard so I can actually see the white because I thought everything was white, but it's not. Okay, so that doesn't matter. So PNG, you want to do bilinear or trilinear or something like that when you do non-pixel art UI, and then export it and then find out where your project is. It's in projects, workshop live. Actually the hardest. So I'm gonna call this something like sprite underscore UI underscore score.
Okay.
you want to use really descriptive names. So now that we have this image here in our project, how you import images is that there's all of these settings. You have to change this texture type to 2D and UI, and hit apply. And you also want to make sure that alpha is transparency, so it's actually transparent. I'm gonna post it on the Discord now, so you can use the same image if you want to. If not, you don't need to. Assets. Have that there. So take a second to do that. I'm gonna go grab some water.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
You don't need to. You have a Steam account?
Steam account. Yes. I'm gonna use it to download things, but other than that,
It's this super funny short game called Pineapple Pizza. You like Pineapple Pizza?
pineapple pizza. I don't like pineapple pizza.
Games
Yeah.
I want to recommend it to you because the art style kind of looks like a game that we were working on for Visual Story, and it's also people dancing to the music on an island. When I see this game, I just thought about you instantly. I need to show it to you, and it's free.
What's your username?
Cat.
You have your friend code.
Have you guys downloaded the image and put it into a project? Okay, so if you just take the image and drag it in here, you can only do this when you have changed it to 2D and UI. You'll see that the image is there now. It's on there. But the aspect ratio is a little weird. If we try to scale it up in the height, you can see that it does not look like what we want it to look like. And this is because we have not 9-sliced our sprites yet. So let's do that by opening the sprite editor.
You need to set this up as the
Yeah.
And then I just choose that. How can I choose it?
You can drag and drop it into this,
To the button.
into the source image for the image
Okay.
on the bottom, yeah. Okay, so you can see if you have this here, you're there. So what we want to do is open the sprite editor. But once we do that, it says no sprite editor window registered. Please download the 2D sprite package from the package manager. And this is because they removed all 2D functionality from the base Unity and moved it into a package. So we have to do exactly as it said there. Go into Window, Package Manager, and then Unity Registry, and then wait for a while. And then we want to download the 2D sprite package. Just install it. You have to pick the Unity registry.
Right. Install.
Yeah, install.
compared to like all.
Yeah, it's really bad UI. So, for example, the search bar is over here, but the results are over here. So that's kind of a disconnect in the UI. You usually want your search bar where the results are, so your eyes don't have to change. But Unity doesn't have a single UX designer on their 2,000-person team. I don't know what's going on. So,
Bunch of programmers that think they can do everything.
yeah.
They
So,
don't need UX.
so now that we open the sprite editor, so now we can see this here. To 9-slice our sprite, there's these green things.
Right.
Yeah, you click on the sprite in the project. The wing. So what you want to do is
Vector, there's a button where you have the image selected.
There is? Is it a component? Or
no, it's on the
the bitch?
and then click on the sprite editor button. So what you want to do is you want to drag these green lines so that they're in the outmost consistent place possible. So let me just do it so you understand what I mean. It would look like this. It should not be in the corners. The corners should have their separate like box here in the corner. And all of these features should be in their own corners. You just want to drag them so they look like that. And usually you also want to make them symmetric. So for example, the values here change when you move it. So I want top and bottom, T and B, to be the same number. So it's symmetrical in both directions. Usually you also want to do it in the other direction, but I don't know what the symmetric line is here. Doesn't matter. And then you want to hit apply. So now what we've done is that we've 9-sliced our sprite. It's called 9-slicing because there's 9 slices here. You can count it to 9. And now that when we scale our image, the only thing that will scale is this middle part. So let's go to our image and then change the image type from simple to sliced. So now you can see it changed completely. Now it's like distorted and stuff, but when I change it to sliced, it's kind of the corners are the same aspect ratio, and the bars here are constant sized.
I just realized something. Before I did that, the image was scaled down.
Hmm.
When I scale it up, now it does. But it was like this.
Yeah, it can go smaller. But I think you can change the pixels for you to change how it scales. So like that. So now it's still like the right situation. It's really small.
My question is more, okay, let me.
Can you show me how you sliced the thing? Because mine looks kind of weird now. What happened here?
You should have the green lines.
Okay.
No, inside the corner. You don't want it to touch the. Want it to here, the 2 pixels.
Yeah.
And also the vertical lines should be inside on
Yeah.
this. Yeah, because it's the middle part that scales.
Okay.
So now when you click apply, you should see that it should.
But okay, and this.
So now when you click on it, the image there, you should see there's a pixels per unit multiplier. You can change that. You can, if you want to change it, you can drag it from here. You can see that there's this one, so you can see how it looks. And maybe this looks good. this is way to build, so you can find a sweet spot for you. Right? Okay, so now that we have our sprite in there, our text is suddenly like it's in the wrong place. So I'm going to go into the layout group and change the right padding so the text doesn't go there. So I'm just gonna click and drag on the left of the input bar until the text is inside of my thing. And I also want to do a left padding because the text is too close to the end for my liking.
Change the font size. If you change it from the text objects.
Yeah, it's the font sizes here on text objects, so you can make it smaller and bigger. Boop, boop. I'm probably also going to show how to import a font with TextMesh Pro because that's also quite important because you always want your own fonts.
So, and if we have time, this is all the graphics. But I was sort of interested in see how to, let's say for example, this is for to have it connected to something in the game.
Yeah, okay.
So,
So we need programming for that, at least like some visual scripting or something to get that working. We can try to do that now. But the last thing I wanted to add was prefabs and how like, oh, now we have this thing here. I only made the top one, but we want all of them to be the same because we see that here. And we learned about prefabs the other time where you change one, you change all of them. So we want to make this a prefab. So I'll pick the first one, name it something appropriate like prefab underscore UI underscore score. And also, you should name these ones something appropriate like text underscore name and text underscore value. You don't have to use underscore. I'm not just doing it because I'm weird. And now we can drag this. Yeah, into the prefabs folder. So now you have this as a prefab. Now you can delete the other ones and duplicate the prefab. And now they're all the same. And when I make a change to one of them and hit apply, all of them change.
So then you just duplicate the first prefab?
Yeah. So now we kind of learned how to make UI. Kind of works. Take the object you have and drag it into your project. That's it. And you can see now the prefab is here. And you can double click and open it up. And you'll see it looks kind of weird because it has to be in a canvas and it creates its own canvas environment. And the width is controlled by the layout group, but when it's alone, it doesn't have a width. So we can give it our own width. So it kind of looks better. And I can change the color to green because the game is green. And then we can go back and see that it's all of them changed.
Great.
Yeah. So now if we want to interact with UI, is that the question? We want to do some interaction, maybe change the numbers, maybe do some buttons.
Yeah, or yeah, just that when you press a key, let's say something in the numbers change. Just that it's connected. How does that connection happen?
So again, everything is components in Unity. So
trigger or something like that?
yeah, so what's our goal? What do we want to change? We want to change the string value in the text input for the TextMesh Pro text UI. That's our goal. We want to change this. But we don't want to change it manually. We want to change it through code. Do you want to do code or do we want to do visual scripting?
I would like to do visual scripting.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna go into the canvas and add a UI button. I'm gonna add a button so we have something to trigger the action.
Let's say that every time you click the button,
Yeah, the number goes up. Okay, so when you click on the button, there's this on-click value. So this happens every time we click the button. We can try to drag their text value in there, the object, and see if there's anything on there that we can use. There might not be. Let me see. So we can change all of these things. We can enable and disable it. And we can do all of these things here. So this is just without scripting. You can just drag and drop it in there. And this is again bad UI. I'm like, I can't scroll through this. I have to click on this little arrow to see all of the functions I can run when I press it. So there's nothing here that is like we can use. I don't think so. Let me see. We're looking for something called text. Which text? String text. Oh, it's actually there. So let me see. Hello. Well. Okay, yeah, it works. So what I did was I added that on-click function, something that runs when we click. I dragged the text value here, the thing that we wanted to change. And then from this drop-down, all of the components that are on the game object are shown. And what we wanted to do is that we wanted to change the text here. It's called the text value on the Text Mesh Pro component. So we go down and we select the Text Mesh Pro and we find a value called text, string text. And now that I've written a text here in the small input field here, I can actually run the game and press the button and then the text changes. So there's actually no coding required just to change the text. But if we want to make the number go up, we need a little code, so we can also do that. That's because you pick the gay out, and what you have to pick is the text on the gay out.
Gay out.
Okay.
So you want to change the component on that game object. So you want to drag that. And now you should see it. Scroll a little down to see this kind of shitty UI.
String text is the
You have to choose this one.
Oh my god. It's not a public picture.
changes one time.
Because it sets the value to that.
It sets the
Okay.
You can see that the text changed.
we didn't want to use that thing because it's like the UI is not great at all. But
Hmm.
we introduce another component to the button.
If we do what?
If we don't want, if we don't want to use this on play,
Yeah, now then we would use code. So, but you would still use this to call the code, but then the code changes the value. So the code would have a number. When you press this, it would change the number, and when the number changes, it would change the text.
Oh.
So we would add an extra layer. Honestly, I don't know how to do it with visual scripting. I'll figure it out, but I do normal scripting. So I don't know how to do that. Let's try. I don't think it will be that bad. Why does it look like that? I think it's here. We want to create a new script graph to do that.
So on the button, we create the
We call it the score manager. Trigger inputs.
For those kind of things, is it important that it has underscores and all that stuff?
No, okay, so naming and stuff is
Your own system.
your own system. Like I'm using something called camel case. It's like all the first letters are big, and then I also add underscores between the words.
Okay.
Because I don't like to use spaces because they're an invisible character, so you can't actually see when a space is there. So depending on readability, it's better to have an underscore, in my opinion. And doing a specific like this, I've learned it to do this way, because when you're reading it, you're often searching in this direction, but when you're naming stuff, you often use the opposite way. So you don't usually name prefab UI score. It's like from the least specific to the most specific, but often you do score UI prefab, something like that, and that maybe makes it harder to search and reduces readability. I'm not sure, like depends on your team and what you like.
Okay.
Prefab UI score, but when it's like this, I know as soon as I see it, I know it's a prefab. Then I know it's a UI prefab, and then I know it's a specific score in the UI prefab. So when you're searching around, you can both search for score, UI and stuff, but when in your search, you can see all prefabs there, and you can also change search options and stuff. It's just personal opinion. It's naming is weird. So I have to figure out how to do this because I don't know how to call a function through a visual scripting stuff. Button, where is the... Did I add the script graph? Okay. Yeah, I also think this is a little specific.
Yeah. You can,
Score management. Yeah, we have to figure this out
yeah, no, we can,
different times.
we can think of like I can. I was just this was really great for layout and all of that. I just wanted to know how do you connect both things.
Yeah. Again, if I do this in code, I can do it in 2 seconds. I can show you real quick on normal code to give you an understanding of how that works. So if I call this the score manager, create a new script.
Coding.
Actually, no, I will have to wait for Unity to compile, so it will probably be 10 minutes. And Visual Studio to open. Yeah, I hope it's... so what you want is you want to be using text TM Pro because it's a different package than default Unity. See, okay. Yeah, this is the last thing we'll do, and then we'll wrap up. So what we want is the specific component. Again, what do we want to do? We want to change the text value on that component. So we get a Text Mesh Pro in GUI. This is our text component. And what we want to do is we want to have a function, a public function that is called add score or something like that. And it should be a void. It should not return anything because it's only doing something. And we want to have a value, which is called our score, and it should be an integer. I'm just, this doesn't make sense because you haven't learned about this, but I'm just trying to explain what I'm doing. Maybe it doesn't make sense, but yeah. So what we want to do when we run this function is we want to add 1 to the score, and we want to change the text component. Text, it knows what I want. We want to change the text component dot text, that's the value, equal to our score, and we want to make it a string. So this is it. This is what we need. Pretty easy.
Where did you put score plus equals 1?
So that's encoding. So that's the same as setting it to equal to score plus 1. So we're setting the score to itself and adding 1 at the same time. So if you only did score plus 1, you're actually not setting anything. You're just doing some math, and the math doesn't do anything. If you just did this, it doesn't really make sense. It even is an error because you're not doing anything. You're not setting anything. You're not doing anything on the computer. What we want to do is set the score equal to itself plus 1.
And you can remove that.
And you can remove that and just do plus equals 1. And there's a lot of these shorthands in programming that you just have to know. What you could also do is just write plus plus. That means plus 1.
Okay.
That just means plus 1. Plus equals 1. So this is the exact same as this, which is the exact same as this. Exactly the same. So now we're adding 3 to our score every time we press the button.
Okay. So you just want one of those.
Yeah, we just want, we can pick it up ourselves. Which one do you like the most? Okay. Do you like this? Is this more concise, or is this easier to understand? It's up to you. But they're all doing the same thing. So I'm gonna do this because it's the easiest. So now that we've gone into our project, so now we have to drag the text we want to change into this box here. So now we have a reference as the same way we had with the button. We know which object we want to change it on and which component. So it's, when we do this here, it's specific a component. It doesn't know which object it does, but yeah, so we're referencing this and we're changing this text component text. So when we do that, and what we have to do is go into the button and then add the score manager instead, and then run the score manager add score function that we just created. So now what happens? See, that was pretty easy for me because I know how to do script, like real script programming, but visual scripting, I don't know how to do public and private functions, so you can drag them and stuff. Okay. So now it's adding every time we press the button.
Okay, excellent.
So now we have a little clicker game. It's actually a game now.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this was really helpful. There's just one, and I know it's a dumb question, but I've never actually done the build of the game. I've always tested it in Unity.
Yeah.
So then you say this is a game.
Yeah.
It's a very simple, stupid game, but it
Yeah.
is a game. How do you do the build?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. If we want to do the build, first of all, I want to censor this button so we can always see it in the game.
Yeah.
You go to File, Build Settings. You add your currently open scene. These are all the scenes that is going to be in your game. I only have this scene, so it's day 3. I call mine day 3. You just click on Open Scene, and then you press Build and Run. You create a folder in your project called Builds. I do that, and you have to be really careful that you don't upload the builds to your version control, because then it will ruin everything. But then you just select the folder and just wait. That's it. It's building right now, and when it's done, it opens it up, and you can send it to your friends.
Okay. So is it done now?
No, because Unity is slow. You have to get used to this.
It's okay. Does this take a long time?
No, the first time could take a long time. We're building for Linux, Windows, Linux, Mac Linux desktop. so it's a little faster, I would say, compared to building for Android or iOS. If you want to build for something else, you have to download the package in Unity Hub. So when you have installs in Unity Hub, you can see I've only downloaded the Windows. I can click here and add modules. And then you have to add, if you want to build for web, press this one. If you want to build for Android, press this one. And then those will pop up. But now it's done building.
And it starts right
And
away.
yeah, it's the game here. And this is a separate, like this is a window separately, and it's a game. You can see that.
You don't need Unity, you don't need anything.
No, I don't need anything. And if you want to send it to your friends, find the builds folder, and you can see there's a bunch of things in here. We actually only need the Workshop Live exe. That's our game. My project is called Workshop Live, so that's why it's called like that. And we need this one, I think, and this one. These folders. You don't need this one. It even says do not ship. You don't need that one. I think we can use the crash handler as well. Compress to zip file and just send this to your friends. And I'll show you because I want to make sure it's correct. Let's just close everything and close this one. And then I'll just drag it to my desktop and unzip it just to show you. Now it's on my desktop. I will extract all. And I'll also close down Unity as well. Just to prove. Now Unity isn't open, and then I'll open the Workshop Live. See, it's a separate game. And you can just send this to your friends, but they have to be using Windows. Even though it said Windows, Mac, and Linux, it's only Windows. You have to be on a Mac to make a Mac build, and you have to be on a Linux to make a Linux build.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's pretty easy. It is that easy when you just do a build, but there will be errors when you build it. There will be runtime errors. There will be a lot of things that are difficult. So when somebody says, "Oh, I'll just make a game for PlayStation 5," it's not that easy. Even though there is an option to export to PlayStation 5, there's a lot of work involved.
Okay. This is just a question is like let's say I have a project and I have a bunch of packages and things that I've used sort of to tweak around like prefabs, models, materials, all of that. When I do a build, does it take all that I have in my project or just what is being used in the scenes that I exported?
Only what is being used in the scenes that are exported. So it's
Okay.
references. So actually sometimes there are some errors because it's taking away what you're not using. But sometimes you're actually using what Unity thinks you're not using, and sometimes there will be errors. So Unity takes away all of the things you're not using, so you don't have to worry about that when you're building your project.
Okay.
But as soon as you use one thing, everything will get imported. So if you use one collider for 3D, the entire physics module will get added to your project. So it will quickly get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Okay.
Because you're using this thing which uses a shader, which uses something else, and then it quickly becomes bigger. So it's something that you should only think about when you actually have a problem. When your project is really big, like some games are gigabytes. Gigabytes is a lot for a
Yeah.
really small game,
Okay.
and it's because they've downloaded a bunch of assets and are using one each somewhere, and a bunch of shaders, a bunch of materials and stuff.
Okay.
But usually, it's not a problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was it. So for
Sorry.
today,
Thank you so much
I think that's it for.
for the whole
Yeah.
workshop.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was great. I don't know. It was really insightful. A lot of like, I don't know, like I knew a bunch of things, but I didn't know the basics of how to actually do it.
Mhm.
For UI, I had done some UI, but I didn't know anything about layout components. Anything like that.
It's great you got something out of it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
it
what we
was
want.
really helpful.
You add a lot of like insights because like a lot of things that you told us are things that, like Monkey said, we know, but we don't think of in depth.
Mm.
So yeah,
Yeah, it's
Mankatak.
some of the things are like you have to fail a lot
Yeah.
to realize it, and you have to play around with it a lot. So yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I'll upload this on YouTube probably. Also, the last one I think I forgot to upload. Thanks for coming, Prince.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bye,
Yeah.
friends.
Bye, Prince. Try to go to sleep at normal
Yeah,
times.
but
Yeah.
I'll try. I'll try.
Goodbye.
Have a great day.